Good morning, my brothers and sisters. It is July the 21st, 2020. It's the 129th day of the quarantine virus, and we find ourselves in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5. I'm going to start at verse 14 today and finish up with our great man who becomes like a little child. It's Naaman. So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So there's a little bit of a play on words here as we have this great man who becomes like a little child. And the way he gets there was by the encouragement of a little servant girl from Israel. So we see this great turning of this prominent man who eventually bows the knee before the Lord. So he's in the river 7 times. His flesh is restored like a little child. He's got one arm that's 45-year-old or whatever, and his other arm, if that's where he had leprosy, is like that of a little child, maybe as a marker for the rest of his life. Then verse 15, then he returns to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him. So initially, when Naaman came before the man of God, Elijah sent a messenger out to him to humble him. But now that part's taken care of, so he goes, this is the first time he meets Elijah, actually. He returns to them. And then of interest, he brings all his company. So he brings the servants, his entourage, his money carriers, his gold carriers, his silver carriers, the chariots, the horsemen, the people that bring the food for the horses. So he's got quite an entourage here. And as witness of this, then he says this, behold, I know there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So this guy becomes a true believer in the one true God. And then he says, so accept now a present from your servant. Now, part of the critical part of the story has been about money. And that is, can you buy spiritual peace with God? Can you buy a relationship with the Lord? The answer to that is no. And because money is such an important part of the story, we know that because he brought $4 million with him. As a point of clarity, I think for 2 reasons: integrity for Elijah, but secondly, just clarity for the story, is you can't buy this, ladies and gentlemen. So money's not going to be a part of this story. And of note here, we're going to get to another guy, Gehazi, where money's going to come back into the story. So Elijah clearly says, no, we're not doing this. I'm not taking your money. Verse 16, but he said, Elijah, as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none. So Elijah says, look, I stand before the Lord with integrity, and I'm not taking your money as if this is something that I did. This was the Lord's doing. They argue about it a little while, or urged him a little bit, verse 16, and he urged him to take it, but he refused. So we have here the prideful man Naaman making a public profession before all these people about who is the Lord, wanting to offer some sort of a thank offering at least to keep things clear. Elijah says no. And then this is one of my favorite parts of the story. Then Naaman says, if not, please let there be given to your servant. So now Naaman, the great man, refers to himself as a servant. Please let there be given to your servant 2 mules load of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt or offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. So one of the things that is done in Israel is that sacrifices are made to the Lord on altars made of earth. So perhaps Naaman is taking Naaman is taking the dirt to make altars in Syria so that the Lord's name can be praised and proclaimed in Syria on an altar. But at least he's taking this, whatever he's going to do with it, which is not totally clear. He's at least taking the memory. He's taking the memory of the place. I think he's doing at least a geographic selfie. And then this is the part which is interesting politically and economically and work situation. In this matter, may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. And Elijah says, yep, that's okay. So Naaman is saying, I have some work duties that, being a man under authority, that are not exactly kosher. Would that be okay? So I think an example would be, let's say you don't support certain arms that the United Way supports, but your company does support that. So can you work at a company that supports the United Way when you know the United Way gives to some organizations that you don't? I think this would be a similar and appropriate thing. Or let's say your company has a work shirt and there's a slogan on it that you can't quite support. Can you, as a believer, work in a place like that? I think it's a similar thing that Naaman is asking, and he gets pardon from him. So I think it's interesting, a couple things about this story, that obviously you can't buy this, but you can be appreciative, and I think it's appropriate for Naaman to try to be appreciative. I think that the public profession that Naaman makes and the negotiations he makes about, okay, I have to live in the real world. I have to work for a guy who doesn't believe the same thing as me. How am I going to do this Christianity thing? And don't we all have to negotiate that as well after we become believers? So tomorrow we're going to come back to the money part of the story. We're going to come back to the greed part of the story with something that's the most offensive part of the story, which is the Gehazi, that's a guy's name, the servant of Elijah. And he says, see, my master has spared Naaman the Syrian, not accepting from his hand what he brought. And as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. Ooh, that's bad. See you tomorrow.